Let's get you up to speed with my DB Cooper investigation and my private person of interest. All right, friends, how you doing? Eric Eulis here. Okay, let's get right into it. My investigation into DB Cooper and specifically my private person of interest, a guy named Vince Peterson that I introduced in my last video. Okay, now here is a picture of Vince Peterson taken in December of 1959. So this was about 12 years before the skyjacking took place. It's been very difficult for me to procure any pictures of this guy around the time of the skyjacking. But just a quick overview related to Peterson. He was 52 years of age at the time of the skyjacking. He was 6'1". The guy worked at a company called Rem Crew Titanium. Specifically, he worked on titanium, pure titanium, as well as a variety of titanium alloys, and also did a lot of work related to salt, and specifically the corrosive effects that salt has on titanium. And that's important because there is a significant amount of salt found on DB Cooper's tie. Importantly, he conducted business in Seattle. He would travel to and from Seattle, as well as some other of Rem Crew Titanium's customers, which again I think is important because obviously DB Cooper had some familiarity with the Seattle region, and Mr. Peterson died in 2002. So what is new? What has transpired? Let's focus a little bit more on this tie, this clip-on tie that DB Cooper had. I think this thing is ultimately is working out to be a treasure trove, I believe, as far as evidence is concerned. Now, obviously, 1971, it wasn't of much value, but again, 2023 here, I think it's of enormous value. Now, I did manage to actually purchase a clip-on tie, find one finally on eBay, a clip-on tie that is exactly like DB Cooper's clip-on tie. However, it's not the same color. Obviously, this is not black. DB Cooper's tie was black, but this is the exact same tie that DB Cooper had, including everything related to the patent number. There's a single patent number on there, and it's a Towncraft number 3 tie. Very, very difficult to find these ties. Now, importantly, there are a couple of things that have come out of this tie here and looking into DB Cooper's tie further. First of all, I think I can say with a large degree of confidence that DB Cooper's tie was manufactured in 1964 and in 1964 alone. And the reason that I can do that relates to this. You'll see that I've got a picture here of the labels that are associated with not only the tie that I have, but DB Cooper's tie. And there are a couple of notable things on here. First of all, there's a patent number, a single patent number on the tie that is very important as far as identifying when the tie was actually manufactured. There's also that Penny's logo that is sewn into the label there. That is also important as far as identifying when this tie was actually produced and obviously sold as well. There are some additional patents, some newer patents that were on later versions of the Towncraft number 3 tie, and indeed some of their other ties. So working collectively with all of this data, all of this information, I've been able to discern, I think with a large degree of certainty, that DB Cooper's tie was actually manufactured in 1964 itself, a very small window, and therefore was probably sold to DB Cooper himself either in 1964 or I would presume no later than 1965. Now, these ties are exceptionally rare, very, very hard to come by, specifically the Towncraft number 3 tie with this one single patent number on it. Again, it appears to me that there was only one lot or one batch of these ties that was made in a very small window of 1964, where everything kind of lines up perfectly there. So for me to find one of these ties is actually was actually very, very difficult. It took quite a bit of time to find it, and so fortunately for us, this is exactly the tie that DB Cooper had. So I think, again, we can narrow it down with a large degree of certainty that the tie itself was specifically manufactured in 1964. Why this is important is because obviously the particles that were found on the tie could not have been could not have gotten onto the tie until the tie was manufactured, until it actually existed. So what this means for our purposes as far as Remcrew titanium is concerned is that it does appear that the only possible place that these particles could have been collected onto D.B. Cooper's tie was called the Robinson facility. This is a facility, a titanium research lab facility that Remcrew Titanium opened up in 1964. So again, it appears that D.B. Cooper was in that facility, at that facility, and it was at that facility that he managed to pick up the various particles and things that were found on the tie, specifically the titanium and antimony alloy. And again, why this is also important is because there were a very small group of people, of 8 men. My understanding is there were 8 men and only 8 men that worked in the titanium research lab. So you've got a very small universe of people that could plausibly have been D.B. Cooper as far as the tie evidence is concerned there. One other interesting thing, I'm going to throw up a picture here related to the tie here, relates to this snapper device, that is a part of D.B. Cooper's tie and indeed is a part of the tie that I have. Now, the picture on the far left is a picture of this little spindle, this little snapper spindle thing that is actually on the reverse side of the knot on D.B. Cooper's tie. This is actually a picture of D.B. Cooper's tie. And you'll notice that the top of that spindle is completely flush with the base. If you look at the picture in the center, that is the picture of the spindle and base from my tie, the tie that I just showed you, which again is exactly like D.B. Cooper's tie, the exception being that it's obviously a different color. Now, the picture on the far right shows that spindle in the extended or upward position. Now, I was unaware that that spindle actually could expand outward and upward, like you can see in the picture on the far right there. It can expand. It can be expanded outward or protrude back in. Now, the reason for this is so that a person wearing the tie can actually adjust the tie knot. He can have the tie knot protruding a little further out or not that far out, depending upon what somebody prefers. Now, I suspect that the FBI wasn't even aware of the fact that the tie could actually do this. I became aware of this only after reading the patents related to the tie. It was upon reading the patents related to the tie that I discovered that the tie could even do this. Why this is important is because you can see from the FBI picture, the one that I showed, it's in the closed position. That spindle is in its lowest position there. And I'm theorizing that if D.B. Cooper at some point actually opened up that spindle, spun that spindle and extended a little bit, he would have gotten his DNA, perhaps a partial fingerprint on the shaft related to that spindle. And then again, obviously, as he closed it, he essentially is lowering into the casing, the spindle casing. He's lowering that shaft into it and securing it. So if there's any DNA on there, and there really should be DNA on there, I don't know how there couldn't be any DNA on there if he touched it at all, that shaft at all, that would be securely and safely locked in the casing for that spindle. So if the FBI was unaware that that spindle even protruded out, then they wouldn't have had any reason to realize or think about the fact that there may actually be DNA locked in there. So having said all that, I've reached out to a former FBI Special Agent Larry Carr. I've talked with him about this to see about gaining access to the tie yet again for the purposes of trying to see if we can pull some DNA off of the shaft that is currently within the casing on that tie. Larry said that he was going to reach out to the powers that be and see what comes of that. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of luck, if any, we have as far as getting access to the tie there and seeing if there's something in the form of DNA that we can come up with from that tie. Obviously, that's critically important. That would be a game changer. If there's any kind of DNA in there, that would settle it. That would settle the case. And if anybody's DNA is in there, on that shaft that's in that spindle there, presumably it's the DB Cooper himself, because obviously the tie was well worn. So this is how the tie is helping us out here. There's also one other thing that I'm looking into with respect to the tie, and this ties in specifically with my private person of interest, Vince Peterson. Here is a picture taken by Tom K of a fiber, what is believed to be a dog hair that was found on DB Cooper's tie. This is obviously important because if we can identify the dog, the type of dog, then this can go a long ways towards helping us narrow down who DB Cooper was. Just as we have titanium particles and rare earth elements and stainless steel and aluminum and other particles on the tie that can indicate a lot with respect to DB Cooper, this dog hair could also be very valuable as well. I do know that Vince Peterson owned dogs during the time of the skyjacking and the years after the skyjacking. I do know what type of breed he had, what breed of dog he had. I'll get that out. What breed of dog he had in the later years, and presumably he had the same breed earlier on. So, having said that, if there's anybody watching this video that can identify or help identify what breed of dog that particular dog hair came from, that would be very helpful. So please feel free to reach out to me, shoot me an email at eric@ericulis.com, because I'd be very curious to find out. I've done quite a bit of research looking into this, but I've had a difficult time procuring many pictures related to, various dog breeds and hairs and things of that nature. I have my speculations or my theories with respect to the type of a dog that hair came from, but I don't want to pollute anybody's mind with my opinion with respect to that right now. So that's what I've got for you right now. The investigation into Vince Peterson continues. I will be at his house in Pittsburgh, his former home in Pittsburgh, very soon here. There's an old sliding door. That's the original sliding door that was there at the time that the Petersons owned the home, that has a track underneath has a track that the door slides upon, and has obviously wheels and so forth at the bottom of that door, that I highly suspect collected at least several dog hairs from his dog. So I've talked with the owner about visiting there and lifting out that sliding door and seeing if we can find a single strand of dog hair, or perhaps a couple of strands of dog hair, for comparative purposes for what was found on DB Cooper's tie. So the investigation continues. So not only am I working the angle with respect to the dog hair, but also working the angle here with respect to that tie, and hopefully we can come away with something in the form of some type of DNA, again, actually on the shaft of that spindle that is actually part of DB Cooper's tie. My thought is that thing has remained closed for 51 years. And if it's closed and has never been opened in the last 51 years, that's an ideal location to preserve DNA. So we'll see what happens there. So, all right, folks, that's all I've got for you today. Of course, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to shoot me an email, eric@ericulis.com. And until next time, cheers.